President Biden has been wrapping up his controversial Middle East trip. It brought criticism for many for this.
I raised it at the top of the meeting, making it clear what I thought of it at the time and what I think of it now. And it was exactly, I was straightforward and direct in discussing it. I made my view crystal clear. I said very straightforwardly, for an American president to be silent on an issue of human rights, is this inconsistent with who we are and who I am?
A fist bump with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man the CIA says ordered the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. President says the Crown Prince denied any personal blame. But several lawmakers are now questioning whether or not human rights advocates and concerns were heard here. It's hypocritical, they say, that Khashoggi's finance tweeted. Biden was one of the Crown Prince's people that he met with to talk about this. And what did the president get out of this trip to Saudi Arabia? We want to welcome back in Rebecca Graham. She's national security analyst and president of Irish Independent Research. Look, Rebecca, we knew going into this meeting there was going to be controversy over this, but the fact that 2 days later now people are still talking about this fist pump, they're not talking about any oil, and we'll get to that in a minute. But how damaging was this to the White House goals of all of this?
My opinion, this was the worst photo op of the Biden presidency for so many reasons. One, it's not a very warm welcome by the standards of Saudi Arabia. And second, this photo pleased nobody. Maybe it was a bad idea for Biden to say in the campaign that he would make Saudi Arabia a pariah state, but he said it. So now he's alienated his supporters on the left and his critics who believe that Saudi Arabia should be an important partner in the region. He got nothing out of this, and there were some takeaways from the meeting, but they were nothing that couldn't have been handled by an ambassador or a cabinet official. I'd say that he really struck out with this photo op on this trip.
But Rebecca, as you know, when they make these overseas trips, they are planned out nearly to the second. The White House knew when the president was going to be on camera with the Crown Prince. Did they leave themselves open to this by making whatever confrontation this was that the president said he had off camera, not on? What we saw on camera was a fist bump.
Yes, it's another staggering miscalculation by this White House, which does a very bad job in foreign policy. Biden just is not looking or acting presidential. I cannot imagine what they thought this would accomplish. They really set it up the wrong way, and it did not help American prestige. It did not help the human rights agenda. It didn't help anything at all, including oil prices.
And we still don't have an exact answer as to what was said and responded to about Jamal Khashoggi. Let's talk about what the goals of this was. Obviously, when it was announced this trip was going to happen, especially to Saudi Arabia, people talked about oil, that if the president made this trip, if he was seen with the Crown Prince, that the U.S. would be getting all of this oil and it would dramatically send oil prices down. Oil prices and gas prices have been falling. What did we get out of this?
Well, we did not get anything in terms of alleviating our pain at the pump. The oil prices had ticked down a little bit, but the day after Biden's fist bump with the Crown Prince, oil prices actually went up a couple of dollars to back over 101 per barrel. The Saudis said they would increase production. They've increased production a bit since last year, but here's the kicker. They'd said they'd go to that top production in the year 2027. Now the White House says, oh, let's wait for the OPEC Plus meeting in August and see if they'll increase production then. But Saudi and other partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council and OPEC have made pretty clear that they just cannot do the capacity increase. So for you and me, for us Americans, what did Biden get in terms of oil? Zero.
First leg of this trip was to Israel, where he met with the current Israeli prime minister, but he also met with the former prime minister, the embattled Benjamin Netanyahu, and then he talked to the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. Now, the president said he was going to look to get these sides back to the table, but we didn't hear that from them, though, Rebecca. Was there a big promise made here that we might not be able to fulfill?
You know, I don't think so. I was glad to see Biden continue support for the Abraham Accords, which are soothing relations between Israel and some of the Arab states. But with Israel, it was sort of just the bare minimum. They agreed that Iran should not get a nuclear weapon, but Israel was left very disappointed by two things. One, Biden's failure to give Iran a deadline to sign that new nuclear deal that's been on the table since April. And secondly, Israel wanted a sort of a red line or a stronger statement from Biden saying that military action will be taken if it looks like Iran's getting close to a nuclear weapon. Obviously, they did not get that. So just the bare minimum with Israel. And I think the Palestinians gave Biden a list of stuff they wanted him to do. So I'm not saying that went so well either.
One of the things the president said was that he wanted to reestablish the United States' position in the Middle East, and he was concerned that Russia, China, or Iran might try to fill that void. Did he accomplish any of those goals?
Valid concern. And he said, number one priority, not to let China go in, because Saudi and other countries want Chinese investment to move into the next phase of their economies and move beyond oil someday. But I thought it was really sad to hear Biden walk away saying that the U.S. is not going to walk away from the Middle East. We're not going to let China, Russia, and Iran, because we know that China is in there in a big way. It's China supporting Iran, buying their oil. Of course, China supporting Russia and their activities in Ukraine. So if that's the bare minimum of U.S. policy, I thought that was a very disappointing statement, not the strong, future-looking leadership I'd like to hear from an American president.
We got about 20 seconds, though. We hear Russia is trying to get armed drones out of Iran. How concerned should we be about that access affecting what's going on in Ukraine?
Desperate Putin is shopping for drones in Iran, and the White House wants us to know it. So they've released some classified imagery showing that we are watching the Russians do that drone shopping. I hate to see any increased cooperation with Iran. Remember, there's Chinese money behind that as well. But it's not going to make a difference for Russia on the battlefield. They can buy all the drones they want, and Ukraine's Air Force can make mincemeat of them.
Rebecca Grant is a national security expert, and we thank you so much for joining us this morning.